אהבת עולם תביא להם, תביא להם. 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 אהבת עולם תביא להם, אהבת עולם תביא להם, אהבת עולם תביא להם, אהבת עולם תביא להם. וברית אבות לבנים תזכור, וברית אבות לבנים תזכור. אהבת עולם תביא להם, אהבת עולם תביא להם, אהבת עולם תביא להם, אהבת עולם תביא להם.
Good evening to everyone. Our sages teach us, Potchim bechvod ha'achsanya, you always start by giving thanks to the host. And this evening we have two hosts for this particular lecture. Number one, in our shul, the Bet-Graden shul in the Zayit, we started a series about a month ago called Israel Politics and Halacha. And we take a topic that's in the news and we try to analyze it halachically. So the last topic we dealt with was the draft controversy, or so-called controversy, of a segment of the Orthodox population refusing to enlist into the army. And I decided this time to take another topic that was in the news. Everybody knows that there were two officers that were privy to information. They leaked that information in interest of saving lives to the Bild newspaper in Germany, as well as not going through the chain of command and giving it to the prime minister himself. And the question is there an actual obligation to keep a secret or not? Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe that's the way a relationship should be. But quite frankly, there isn't an actual obligation. So that's achsanya number one. And achsanya number two are many that are on the Zoom that come together every year for the yortzeit of my father, who I'm dedicating the shir to, Tzvi Meir ben Moshe Yehonathan zichrono levracha lחיי העולם haba. Ever since his passing 6 years ago, we've had a lecture in his memory close to his yortzeit. Fate has had it that both his father, my grandfather, and him happened to pass away on days where it's impossible to have a more normative yortzeit. You can't fast. My grandfather died on Purim. My father died on Rosh Chodesh. And you can't have the normal mishnayos and whatnot. So therefore, in both cases, we had to find other ways to dedicate something to their memory. And I think that my father would be very happy that we're actually dedicating it not just to a halachic topic, but one that's very much in the news, simply because he did follow the Israeli news, both living in Israel for the majority of his life, as well as when he lived in America. So without further ado, let's begin. Is there an obligation to keep a secret? Someone tells you a secret, can you tell that secret over to others? I'm not talking about Cherem de Rabbi Gershom and later enactments. I'm talking about real halacha that we got, Moshe Sinai. Is there an obligation or not? So, indeed, our prophets throughout the generations have said in many, many different ways to keep a secret. You could see on the source sheet right in front of you, Holech Rachil Megales Sod, if you're a blabbermouth and you start telling secrets, you shouldn't do that, but rather, if someone tells you a secret, keep it secret. And there's a whole bunch of other psukim here from Micha and from Mishlei, basically saying it's a good idea to keep secret. Someone tells you something in confidence, keep it in confidence. Having said that, there's also an actual halachic story in the Gemara in Sanhedrin about the person that didn't keep a secret. and actually got very royally reprimanded for it. And here's the story, Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, and I quote the story to you. Minayin kishiyatza, lo yomar, hareini mizakeh v'chaverai mechavin, aval ma'aseh shechaverai ravu alai. There were 3 judges on a case. 2 of them said the person's guilty. 1 of them said he was innocent. How do we know that the person that said he was innocent cannot afterwards divulge that information to the parties? Talmud lomar, lo telech rachil be'amecha. You should not go and be someone that is a slanderer. Ve'omer, quoting one of these psukim, holech rachil megalesot. And indeed, the Gemara brings a story that I find fascinating about Ahu Talmida, a student in the base medrash. Dema nafik alai kala de gale milta de itmar beit midrasha batar esrin vetartin shnin. There was a student that ultimately came along and came and told a secret that was told 22 years ago in the study hall. Rashi says it was some Lashon Hara, the Ran said it was a Chiddush, but it was told as a secret. And even though 22 years went by, the Gemara says explicitly in this particular reference that they went ahead and they threw him out of the base medrash and they called him a person that has a din of gali razia, namely a person that can't keep his mouth shut. In other words, to make a long story short, we are talking about something that is very real in the eyes of the sages. And indeed, the Shulchan Aruch paskins this halacha and says that when 3 judges are in a closed room and they decide what they decide by majority rule, they can't go out and then say, oh, it was up to me, I would have said you were innocent. Secrets are secrets, and they should be kept. However, even though this is what I would say logical, not only logical, but we actually have takanos of different communities that actually made it clear that when there is closed meetings, they are closed meetings. You can't take the protocol and then send it around via email, WhatsApp, as if it's everyone's business. If you look at the Shut Ra'anach, the Ra'anach was a rabbi in Turkey at the 16th century, Rav Eliyahu ben Chaim, and he writes, and I quote, Gazarnu shtam becherem. We made a cherem. She'ish mimenu lo yomar leshum echad mi ba'alei ariv shani hayiti mezakeh otcha bedin Torah. Exactly what the Shulchan Aruch said. They had to make a cherem because apparently this was a problem. V'nira la'aniyut da'ati, and I think shekol ha'oseken afilu b'lava cherem aniskar ein lo hoshivo im tuvei ha'kahal. And if you have a blabbermouth that can't keep his mouth shut, then he should not be part of these closed meetings. This is not just the case in Turkey, but in a book called Yahadut Polin Velita Al Ad Shnat Tavchet, meaning the Judaism that existed in Poland and in Lithuania until the Shoah. It's a book in Yiddish, but I'm translating from the Yiddish. Indeed, it says, Gesherashim, when the heads of the community, mitkansim leyeshiva, when they come together for a meeting, mina muskamotu shein megalim et tochnam le'elu sheinam nimnim im hanagat ha'kehila. If there's a board meeting, then only the board members know what is said in that meeting. And if a board member goes ahead and start divulge information from that board meeting, marchikim et hamadlif, modern word, you go ahead and the person that spilled the beans, you make sure that he's not going to be part of the meeting b'meshech shanat mima mi'shivot ha'kahal, and he can't be part of the meetings for an entire year. So we saw psukim in the Nevi'im, and we saw stories in the Gemara, and we actually saw one halacha regarding Dayanim, but the question is very simple. Is there a bona fide Isser or not? When something is said in secret, not to divulge that information. And if there is a prohibition, are there exceptions to the rule? That's going to be the topic for this evening. So, I want to go back to my childhood. I'm sure many on this Zoom had the same experience in their grade school. When you were in grade school, I'm pretty sure that somewhere along the line, you were told to read a pasuk in the Chumash and translate it into English. Am I correct? I'm not alone on this. Every time you got to that annoying pasuk, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor, How did you translate it? And God said to Moshe, saying. And for my whole life, I had no idea what that saying meant. What do you mean saying? God said to Moshe. Now let's hear what God said to Moshe. What does lay more add to the discussion? And why do we need to translate it each time we read it? So, as surprising as this sounds, the Gemara in Yuma, Daf Dalet, picks up on this word lemor and says it actually has a very practical halachic ramification. And what is the practical halachic ramification of the word lemor? Says the Gemara, and I quote, at the orange on the right side, Minayin lo omer davar lechavero, shehu bebal yomar, ad sheyomar lo lech emor. How do we know that when a person is told something, he's not allowed to say it to anyone unless the person that told you said lech emor? Lemor is a conglomeration of two words, lech emor, go and say. How do we know that when Moshe Rabbeinu was told something by God, he's allowed to tell the Jewish people only if it says lemor, shene'emar vaydaber Hashem elav me'ol moed lemor. Beginning of Sefer Vayikra, we have all the halachot of korbanot, of sacrifices. The only justification for Moshe to tell us about it, for us to know about it, is because God said, lay more. So first of all, whoever your teacher was in grade school was wrong. It doesn't mean saying. It means say it. It means you are allowed to say it. But if not, if the word lay more was not there, if it only said Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe, and God said to Moshe, maybe Moshe was not allowed to say it. According to this Gemara, it seems very clear that if someone tells you something, it's between you and only between you, unless he or she gives you permission to say it to others. Now, against this beautiful Gemara, on the orange side of the page, look on the blue side of the page, and you'll see that there's a Tosefta in Bava Kama. And the Tosefta talks about exactly the same topic. After all, Moshe Rabbeinu was told by God words of Torah. So the Tosefta comes along, and the Tosefta actually comes and says that, indeed, Hamit Ganev me'achar chaver, if you go behind someone who's teaching Torah, veholech veshoneh pirko, and he's teaching Torah, teaching some Chiddush, af al pi shenikra ganav, even though you're going to tell the whole world his Chiddush, and you're a ganav, no less. So chel atzmo. Actually, you did a good thing for the Jewish people. Shene'emar lo yavozu laganav. This particular ganav is going to be rewarded. How is he going to be rewarded? You could see the Tosefta. Basof mitpaneh parnasa latzibur, u'mezakeh harabim, v'zocheh la'atzmo, u'mishalem kol ma she'ya biyado. So if a person literally hears a secret Chiddush in Torah and tells the whole world about it, according to the Tosefta, even though he's a ganav, he's going to have a great reward, which opens up a Pandora's box that I do not want to open this evening, called copyright in Torah. Is there copyright in Torah? There's a shach here quoted on the page that's very famous, as well as the Netziv, that's even more famous, that says that if a person said, I wrote Chidushim and I do not want you to publish it. The Soloveitchik family was known to be very scared to publish things because maybe they'll change their mind. Even so, when it comes to Torah, you're allowed to go ahead and make it public. So it seems like we have a very clear contradiction between two sources. One source says, if it doesn't say lemor, lechemor, go say it, you're not allowed to say it. And it's talking about words of Torah. That's what Moshe and God discussed. And on the other hand, we have a Tosefta in Bava Kama that says, even though you're a ganav, when it comes to Torah, you should tell the whole world about it. So let's go to the poskim and see how do they reconcile these two sources. Are you allowed to divulge information that's secret, even if it's Torah? Going to the next page with your permission, you could see that there are 4 points of view on this topic, and we'll go from right to left. The Rambam does not hold from this Gemara of Lemor. The Rambam basically says there's one pasuk in Chumash, lo telech rachil be'amecha, don't be a slanderer, and that is the only prohibition involved. The lemor is a nice drasha. The rabbi can quote it Friday night in shul when he gives his speech, or you can quote it at the Shabbos table, but it's only a drasha. Says the Rambam, hameragel bechavero, a person who collects gossip about a colleague, over b'lo taseh, shene'emar, lo telech rachil be'amecha, and then the Rambam goes on and says all the terrible things that can happen when you go ahead and become a gossiper. So we all know that Chafetz Chaim devoted part of his life to this issue, and we know that you shouldn't be a gossiper, but there's no prohibition on the books to keep a secret. However, the Smag, Rav Moshe Mikutzi, who was born around 1200, the beginning of the 13th century, who actually tried to combine the psukim of the Rambam with Ashkenaz. And indeed, he succeeded to bring the Rambam into Ashkenaz because so many Perushim were written on the Smag, on the Sefer Mitzvot Gadol. In the gray section, you'll see that the Smag says, again, not quoting the lemor thing, but quoting lo telech rachil be'amecha, but adding to the words of the Rambam, and says, Ezohu rachil, who is a gossiper, ha-megaleh lechavero dvarim, if you tell your friend things, shediber mimeno beseter. When your friend told you a secret and you told it over to someone else, that is a violation of a biblical prohibition of lo telech rachil be'amecha. So the Smag does believe that there is a prohibition, albeit not the lemor thing. But when you read Rashi on the Gemara in the green section, you'll see that Rashi says explicitly lemor, lo emor dvarim elaim ken noten lo reshut. Rashi says explicitly, this is a prohibition. The lemor thing is a prohibition, and it means you're not allowed, I repeat, not allowed to tell a secret unless the person said, I allow you to share it. The Ritva, one of the other Rishonim, comes along and says, "Afilu b'makom sheyesh kriya," even if it's public information. In other words, you were told a secret, and the next day you see it in the newspaper. So it's no longer such a secret, not because of you, someone else leaked the story. Afilu b'makom sheyesh kriya, sheshomin kol hadibur. There's an alleged story in Ynet and J-Post that says this and this happened. Hu bebaal yomar ad sheyomar lo lechemor. You are not allowed to divulge that secret unless the person that told it to you gives you permission. And indeed, in the Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avraham quotes this lemor thing and says, this is the halacha. V'ima omer masir shelo lomar, afilu amaro bifnei rabim, yesh bo mishum lashon hara. However, even though the Smag says it's an isser of lo telech rachil be'amecha, and Rashi and the Ritva seem to say it's an isser of this lemor thing, there is the Meiri in the blue section that seems to say that it's not a good thing to indeed divulge secrets, but a isser it is not. He says that the lemor thing is, and I quote, limadnu derech eretz. This is proper human conduct. Lemisha omer davar lechavero, if you told something to your fellow Jew, afal pi shelo misaralo besod, even though he didn't say it's a deep, dark secret, shehu bebal yomar, elaim kain, amar lo bala davar, shu omer lo otam dvarim belechem. In other words, even though it's not an isser, it's derech eretz. The Gemara in Yuma is teaching us derech eretz. Someone tells you something, assume it's so told in confidence, and do not divulge the secret. Rabbeinu Yonah in the Sharei Tshuva, and again, the Sharei Tshuva is not a halachic work, but a work on working on your midot, working on your character traits, something we all need. Indeed, Rabbeinu Yonah says, Chayav adam lahastir asod, asher yigaleh elav chavero derech seiter. You have to keep secrets. And he gives 3 good logical reasons why. But he's not saying it's a halachic isser of any sort, but rather he says it's a good idea. And I have to admit, reading his words, it seems like a very good idea for these 3 reasons. Number 1, yesh begilui asod nezik leba'alav, v'siba la'afer machshavto. How do you know that the secret is not going to hurt your friend? let's say your friend told you, I don't like this chazan. So you go around and you say, this chazan's no good, I heard it from X. Now you're causing a fight between X and this chazan. Number 2, ki megaleh asod ach yatsa miderech hatzniut. We always think tzniut means to dress in a certain way. Tzniut means to be modest. You don't go ahead and be a blabbermouth. And when you go ahead and tell secrets and become a blabbermouth, then unfortunately, if you don't have control on your mouth, it's the opposite of tzniut, and we all have an obligation to be humble people. And number 3, says the Rabbeinu Yonah, holech rachil megalet sod, al tafkid sodcha lemi sheholech rachil, ki acharei she'inenu shomer sfatav min harichilut, al tiftach alav behester sodecha. If there are secrets, and they have to be told for good reasons, if you're going to tell it to someone that can't keep his mouth shut, it's not going to work. But the Meiri and Rabbeinu Yonah basically say it's a good idea, it's derech eretz, but an obligation or a prohibition, it is not. And indeed, they're not alone. Rav Betzalel Stern, who was a rabbi in various countries, including Australia, England, eventually Israel, writes that if a person wrote a book of Chidushei Torah, and this book, he said, do not publish, and he deals with it. He says, "Bevadai nitchet derech eretz shel Torah mipnei mitzvah zu." Indeed, it's derech eretz not to divulge secrets, but if it's a book of Torah, then you should overcome the derech eretz for the sake of Torah. So to sum up what we said until now, there seems to be a Gemara in Mesechet Yuma on the words lemor that we read so often in the Torah, that basically connotes if God didn't tell you explicitly to say it, Moshe couldn't have said it, which means we, anytime we're told anything in confidence, we're not allowed to say it. That seems to be the way Rashi and the Ritva and the Magen Avraham learn the Gemara. The Smag learns the same law, albeit from a different pasuk, lo telech rachil be'amecha. The Rambam doesn't hold from this at all, and the Meiri and Rabbeinu Yonah basically say it's a good idea, but a prohibition, it is not. So let's see 2 test cases, with your permission, after putting down these fundamentals, and see how this works out. The first case, I have to say, I found to be fascinating. It was about a fascinating person. 2 fascinating people, actually. Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli. And the case seems to be funny in retrospect, but at the time, it was a big tumult. So let's see what this case was. As we go down the source sheet, here comes the test case. We have a date, we have the time, we have everything. So we're talking about 1982. In 1982, Rosh Hashanah, there was a newspaper in Israel, by now Zichrona Livracha 10 times over, called Hatzofeh. It was the religious Zionist newspaper. And obviously for the Rosh Hashanah edition, they're looking for a good scoop. They're not going to put in their boring things. So they went to Rav Goren, who was a fascinating person in and of itself, a Talmid Chacham Mufak, a courageous person, a fearless person. We all know that iconic picture of him when he went to the Kota with his chauffeur on the 6-Day War. And he went to Rav Goren, a guy named Mr. Moshe Ishon, the editor of Hatzofeh, and he wanted to ask Rav Goren a simple question. I need a good story for Rosh Hashanah.
Give me my phone.
So,
Thank you, guys.
ultimately, someone's not muted. Anyway, make a long story short, he went to Rav Goren, and he asked Rav Goren to please go ahead and to give me a good story. So Rav Goren started to tell him about Rosh Hashanah, the day of the creation of the world. Didn't interest him. And then out of the corner of his eye, he sees on the desk a piece of paper. And in this piece of paper, there is a give and take between him and Rav Shaul Yisraeli, another great gadol, the Rav of Kfar Oreh, a dayan in the highest court in Israel, about a very important issue in 1982, and that is encircling the city of Beirut. Halachically, there are laws of how do you encircle, lay a siege on a city. And Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli had a give and take on this issue, trying to go ahead and deal with what is the best possible way to go ahead and do it halachically. It was private letters between them, and indeed, Mr. Rishon sees this and says, wow, this is a scoop, a real scoop. So he says, and I quote his words, this is Rav Goren's description, you decided to put it into the Rosh Hashanah edition. And I said it would be a good idea for you to please call Rav Yisraeli in order for you to get his permission to actually put his letter in the newspaper. So Mr. Rishon said, sure, walked out. What do you think Mr. Rishon did? So he did everything but one thing. He did put the letter in the newspaper. It did come out, but he forgot to call Rav Yisraeli. And then I found out, you actually publicized this. So what do we do now? So if the story ended here, I would say that if I was Rav Goren, and believe me, I'm far from being even close to his Gedula, I would have said, you should publicize that this was a private letter and you made a mistake, and that's it. But Rav Goren decides to defend Mr. Rishon. And he basically says that it's okay to take a letter that was told to you in private, namely a letter between Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli, and to publicize it because no harm done. At the end of the day, it's Torah thoughts. If you look at the green section, Rav Goren defends Mr. Rishon. He said, first of all, he never said not to go ahead and to divulge the information. He just wrote me a private letter. There was no explicit instruction. This is a secret. We share Torah thoughts all the time. He said this, he said that. So what's the big deal? What are we going to do with that Gemara in Yuma that says lay more, that you're not allowed to say it unless the person allows you? He tries to explain the Gemara. And I admit, I went over this 5 times. I don't understand his explanation. The Gemara doesn't say that Moshe was prohibited from saying anything God told him unless God explicitly said you can divulge the secret. Ela kavanat Gemara lidrash hamila lemor shebal lahorot shel kol davar shehu bebal yomar ad sheyomar lo lechemor. Only in special cases this is the case, and not in all cases. V'she'en medubar b'divrei Torah, and it doesn't include divrei Torah like the Tosefta we saw in Bava Kama. I don't understand his words. I really don't. The only thing I understand is that what he writes about actually publicizing letters from great rabbis without their permission is indeed something that has been done and continues to be done until this day. But how does he explain the Gemara in Yuma that says explicitly, if God didn't say lay more, you're not allowed to say it? I don't get his explanation. So Rav Yisraeli writes back to Rav Goren. And he, in the blue section, he writes, quoting a Medrash Tanchuma, which is a beautiful Medrash, with a very practical halacha for this Shabbos. As a matter of fact, for every time a person gets up to lay in. Says the Midrash Tanchuma, Vayedaber Elokim, and God told the Jewish people the 10 Commandments. We read it 2 weeks ago in Parshat Yitro. And then it quotes a pasuk in Eov, Azra'ah, then God saw, Vayisapra, Hechina, Begam Chakra. God saw, God said it, God prepared it, and then God investigated it. Va'acharei kain, and only afterwards, Vayomer la'adam, lelamedcha, says the Medrash, HaTorah, she'im tiyeh ben Torah, lo tiyeh ruchachacha gasa, lomar davar lifnei hatzibur, ad shetifshot ota bencha leben atzmecha, 2-3 פעמים. Says the Medrash Tanchuma, if you have a Torah thought Say it to yourself at least 3 to 4 times, because that's what God did when he gave the Torah. He didn't just spit it out. Even though God knew the whole Torah, he didn't have to practice. He taught us, if you're about to say something publicly, make sure it's polished. Make sure you know that every word you're saying won't be misunderstood. And it brings a story about one of the great heroes of the Tanaic period, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was in shul on Shabbos. You know what? He was in shul tomorrow, Thursday. And they asked him to read the Torah. Once upon a time, in certain Sephardic shuls, this is still done. The person that gets the aliyah is the person that reads the aliyah. There isn't a Baal Koreh and the guy that gets the aliyah. There's one guy, and he's the guy that both reads the Torah and gets the aliyah. So they called up Rabbi Akiva for an aliyah. V'lo ratzah la'alot. Amru lo talmidav. His students told him, Rabbeinu, lo kach limidetanu. This is not what you taught us. Ki chayecha ve'orech yamecha. You should always look for ways to be connected to the Torah. Ve'lama nimnata milahalot. Why didn't you get an aliyah? Why did you refuse the aliyah? Amar lahen avodah. I'll tell you honestly, lo nimnati likrot. I knew the aliyah. I knew it pretty well. Ela shelo sidarti ota parsha shnayim shlosha pa'amim. She'en adam rashay lomar divrei Torah lifnei hatzibur ad shifshot ota bet gimel pa'amim beino levein atzmo. You cannot give a lecture or teach Torah publicly, and laning is public Torah learning, unless you have said it to yourself at least 3 times. And indeed, this is the halacha. The Shulchan Aruch Paskins in Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah. B'makom shenahagu sha'oleh atzmo koreh b'kol ram. You're in a Sephardic shul, and you're going to get an aliyah, and they told you shlishi. You, im lo sider tchila parasha pamayim v'shlosha beino levatzmo, lo ya'aleh. You're not allowed to get the aliyah unless you went over it 3 times. You may make a mistake, you may misread it, and indeed the Ramah says in our Ashkenazic shuls, where there's a Baal Koreh, b'makom sha'chazan koreh, hu tzarich l'sader tchila. So we're obligated each week to read the Parsha, Shtayim Mikra, the Echad Targum, that takes care of twice. If you're the Baal Koreh, you have to go over it at least 1 more time. So says Rav Shaul Yisraeli, what is this whole lemor thing about? Why can't you divulge secrets, even Torah thoughts? Very simply. Maybe it's not polished. I wrote you a letter, a private letter. If I knew that it's going to go for publication in a newspaper, and thousands are going to read it, very much like reading Torah in public in shul, then I would have gone over it 3 times, just like God did before he gave us the Torah. Quoting his words, Rav Shaul Yisraeli told us, "Shebaim lelamed latzibur, yesh lanu lilmod midarko shel haborei yitbarach." When you come to teach the public, learn from God. She'ein lomar dvarim, don't say things, b'li bonenut amuka shel 4 pe'amim. Because you can misread, you could say something you didn't mean, and unfortunately, it could be misconstrued, and who knows what damage can come out of it. So, make a long story short, if there is a prohibition of divulging secrets, Rav Yisraeli definitely says it includes Divrei Torah, and even more so Divrei Torah, because you have to be careful what you say publicly. It could be misconstrued, misunderstood, and then the next day we'll wake up and say he really didn't mean it, he meant it this way or that way. Practice it 3 to 4 times before posting it on Twitter, on Facebook, or saying it on the news. And that was his objection to going ahead and to having his private letter written to Rav Goren, as 2 rabbis write to each other, being published in a newspaper, not only any newspaper, but the religious Zionist newspaper for Rosh Hashanah, which I'm pretty sure was very, very read. He's not alone. The Avnei Nezer, the Sachat Rebbe, who was one of the Rebbeim that was a huge lamdan, wrote the Eglei Tal beyond the Shut Avnei Nezer that I'm quoting from, writes a very similar story. I got your book. It's called Bikurei Shlomo. Uvot tshuva asher ashivotiv. And there's a tshuva in there, responsum, that I answered you, that you asked me. V'gam asher shalach alai tshuva al michtavi. And your follow-up is also in there. Lo yashra be'enai al asher itpis divrei tshuvati b'li rishuti. I'm not very happy that you went ahead and published my answer without my permission. Terem asim einai elav imra'u lafitzo pnei tevel. In other words, I have privileged information because I'm an officer in the intelligence unit, and I think it's going to save lives. I can't be haphazard and just send it off to newspapers. At least think about it 3 times like God did. Number 2, think about the fact that it may even be a prohibition. You can't go ahead and divulge secrets haphazardly because it could be misunderstood. When you publish a book, you write it, you edit it, then there's an editor, then there's an editor on the editor. It doesn't just get published overnight. The same thing is true with secrets. Someone told you something in confidence. It was sporadic. It was spontaneous. It's not for publication right away. So, as you could see, not only did the Gdolei Harishonim have a machlokes, is there a prohibition to tell a secret, but later on in life, in 1982, Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli debate this very point. As a matter of fact, going into contemporary times, into this war, there's another test case that I'd like to bring to your attention, and that is, can you tell secrets to save your life? So as everybody knows, when David HaMelech was on his deathbed, he instructed his devoted son Shlomo to do certain things, and amongst them to kill certain people. And amongst them, his minister of defense, Yoav ben Tzuriah. Velama ne'erag, says the Medrash, why was he killed? Shekach tziva David aviv. Indeed, David told Shlomo to kill him. Why? Because years before, there was a big secret between Yoav, the defense minister, and David. Whoever learned Shmuel Bet, Perek Tet, Yud, knows the story of David and Bathsheba, knows that David wanted to cover it up, so he told Yoav, get the husband of Bathsheba, put him in danger's way in the war, so in all likelihood he will be killed, and then I'll marry Bathsheba, sort of out of mercy, and the son that's born, everyone will think, was conceived after the marriage. That's the story as we read it in the Tanakh. Well, indeed, according to the Medrash, that's not the reason why Yoav was killed. Yoav was killed because he actually showed that letter publicly to his soldiers. His soldiers said, Yoav, our commander, how are you putting this person in harm's way? So, what did Yoav do? In the middle of war, he showed secret commands from the primary chief of staff, namely David HaMelech, to all the soldiers without permission. So even to save your own life, you're not allowed to divulge secrets. Later on, he was killed for divulging secrets during war. As a matter of fact, the Meshech Chochma, Rav Meir Simcha Midvinsk, who actually functioned in the 20th century as well. Dvinsk was a very unique town. It had a Hasidic Rebbe called the Rogachover, who was in charge of the Hasidim. He was the rabbi of the Hasidim. He wasn't a Rebbe. He was an interesting character in and of itself. And Rav Meir Simcha was the rabbi of the Lithuanians, and they were both rabbis in the cities, in that same city. Today we have the Sephardi Ashkenazi chief rabbi, then they had the Lithuanian Hasidic chief rabbi. So he was the Lithuanian chief rabbi. He wrote a Perush on Chumash called Meshech Chochma, and he writes that when the pasuk says, Ki tetzeh lemilchama machane aloivecha v'nishmarta mikol davar ra, when you go out to war, be very careful from anything evil, he goes ahead and interprets what's evil, shelo legalot mistorin shel hamilchama, v'shelo lesaper ocham v'rovam l'shum ish. In other words, during war, unfortunately, and we know this from this war, people are taken captive, amongst them soldiers, amongst them soldiers that know privileged information. They will probably be tortured, and it's going to be very difficult for them not to divulge secrets. And that's exactly what the Meshech Chochmah says the Torah is warning you. When you're a commander, you better know where your soldiers are, because if someone's kidnapped, that can lead to a chain reaction in which he's kidnapped, tortured for privileged information that could put Israeli soldiers in harm's way. So even to save your own life, according to this Meshech Chochmah, based on the Medrash, you're not allowed to divulge secrets. And that's why a good commander knows where his soldiers are and doesn't let that happen. And ultimately, the Meshech Chochmah says there are two kinds of Lashon Haras. One Lashon Hara is the regular Lashon Hara that we all say to each other, unfortunately, and it's an Avera we have to work on. But there's another Lashon Hara, says the Meshech Chochmah, and that is secrets of war. And I quote his words, V'hasheni, Lashon Hara, michutz l'machane Yisrael, taking out a secret from within the camp of Israel during war. It could be very disastrous. So to sum up what we said until now, there may be a prohibition or maybe not a prohibition to divulge secrets. Everyone agrees it's a bad idea. Is it an actual prohibition? Seems from Rashi and the Ritva, yes. The Smag for sure, but from a different pasuk, not the Lemor pasuk. The Rambam doesn't hold from it, but the Meiri, Rabbeinu Yonah, says it's derech eretz. And we saw a test case between Rav Goren and Rav Yisraeli. Can you take a private Torah letter, not earth-shattering, a private Torah letter, and publish it without permission? And we also saw just now, we just saw that even to save your own life during war, it actually is something that's not allowed. So, putting this all together, I'd like to end and ask, is there an exception to this rule? Is everything that's told to you in confidence not allowed to be exposed? Namely, you know some private information, privileged information of some sort. Is there some sort of a actual exception to the rule that will tell you, hey, in this case, you do have to go ahead and make it public? Is there such a case or not? And the answer is absolutely. And allow me to quote the story from the source. In Mesechet Avodah Zarah, there is a story that goes like this. Rabbi Yochanan chash b'tzafidina. Rabbi Yochanan had some sort of an infection in his eyes. So at that time, you didn't go to a doctor only. You went to a chemist. So azil legabe dahi matrutna. So this chemist gave him some sort of a treatment in Chamasha on Thursday, Umala V'Shapta on Friday. And now on Friday, after the treatment, just before he left, Amarle, he said to this woman, Lemachar mai, what am I supposed to do tomorrow? Tomorrow's Shabbos. I can't drive to your office to get the treatment. Amartle lo tzrichet. She said, you know what? You can skip a day. He didn't like that answer. If I get up in the morning and I'm in terrible pain in my eyes, what should I do? Amra, so this woman who had this secret potion for the eyes said, Ishtabali de lo makailat. I want you to swear to me that you will not tell anyone the secret potion. Obviously, she knows the secret. She's getting paid for it. She doesn't want her pharmaceutical secret to be public. But she told this particular rabbi, because he swore to her that he won't tell anyone. Yishtabidla le'elohei Yisrael lo megalne. I swear to God, I will not tell anyone. Going back to my grade school years, how many times did our friends say, do you promise? Yes. Do you swear? Yes. And this went on and on. until Rabbi Monk came along. I had a great Rebbe in 3rd grade, Rabbi Monk. And Rabbi Monk was from Hungary, came to Israel, taught us in Hebrew. That's where I learned my initial Hebrew. And he once overheard this dumb conversation between kids. Do you promise? Yes. Do you swear? Yes. And he went ballistic. If you would have told him that you went to a Buddhist temple the night before and bowed down to the statue, there wouldn't be the hole in the ceiling that there was after he heard these words. He banged on the table and said, swear! Swear! A person would tell his mother before he swears. I didn't know then what it means to take a shvuah, to swear, and to swear in the name of God. I swear to God. I didn't think it was such a big deal. It's like what kids talk about. You can well imagine that from that day on, the word swear really scared me. In any case, Galilei, the woman was convinced. He said, I swear to God. She indeed told him the secret potion for the eyes. Lemachar, the next day. What did this wonderful Rabbi Yochanan do? So Rabbi Yochanan was feeling a little better, so he went to shul. What used to happen on Shabbases in the times of the Gemara? There wasn't just davening and chulent and kugel and a nap. There was also a public drasha on Shabbos. There were many halachos that were associated with this public drasha. For example, one is going to be very relevant outside Jerusalem this year. There's a Gemara in Gittin that I didn't quote that talks about 2 families that were eradicated from Jerusalem simply because they made their Shabbos meal during the drasha and shul. So the drasha and shul was a big thing. So Rabbi Yochanan felt better. He went to shul to give his lecture, Nafak Drasha Befirka. And during the drasha, he decided to say, hey guys, you know what I know that you don't know? I know the potion for the eyes. And he told everyone the potion. You mix this with that, you don't need to go to the chemist. Well, the next day, news gets back to the chemist. And she says, but you swore to me. Rabbi Yochanan, without batting an eyelash, says, Le'elokei Yisrael lo megalna, aval le'ame Yisrael megalna. What did I say? I said, I swear to the God of Israel that I will not let him know. Who did I give the drasha to? I gave the drasha to the Jewish people, so I didn't tell God. I told the Jewish people. That's the way he got out of his swearing of not telling anyone. Ve'ha'ika chilul Hashem? Maybe there's a chilul Hashem involved, because he did say, I swear. Forget about being pedantic. You swore to God, you swore to the Jewish people. The Galilei Meikara, the Gemara, gives some sort of an answer. What do we learn from this Gemara? We learn from this Gemara that you're not supposed to tell secrets unless it's public knowledge that can save a lot of people. Namely, if you know the vaccine for COVID during the height of the years of COVID, then you should share that with as many people as possible because you're going to save lives. Baruch Hashem, today, in the year 2025, we can look back and say, COVID was a nightmare, but today we live with it. And it's because the vaccine became public. So if you have something that's going to help at least the public health of the populace at large, you're allowed to say it, even though it was told to you in a secret. The Rambam paskins this explicitly and goes a step further. Over alota amod al dam riecha. If you can save someone and you didn't, you are violating the prohibition of seeing someone die and just staying there idly. You see someone get a heart attack, you don't even call an ambulance. That's a prohibition of lota amod al dam riecha. And the Rambam goes on. You overheard non-Jews saying, we're going to get this Jew. They're about to trick him. And you didn't tell the secret to your friend. And anything like it. There was a famous case of a rabbi here in Israel that was called at night and was asked, should I go into business with a certain individual? And he said, I would advise you against it. The person's a crook. He did what the Rambam said. He was sued in court because he badmouthed someone. But he did the right thing. A poor Jew was about to go into business with someone crooked, and he saved him. So the Pitchei Tshuva, not the regular Pitchei Tshuva on Yoreh Deah. This is the Pitchei Tshuva on Lechai. It's a different person. For those that know the Pitchei Tshuva on Yoreh Deah, he writes all the Achronim up until his time and every thing they dealt with. This is a different Pitchei Tshuva. It's on Lechai. His name is Rav Yisrael Isser. His year is 1827 to 1889. He wrote on Lechai. And he writes something that I think we should all take to heart. He says, Hinei b'magen Avraham b'sifrei HaMusar. There is a lot of literature about Lashon Hara. So therefore, I find it to be my mission to lehair le'idach gisa. I have to warn you about the other side of the coin. We should keep secrets. It's the right thing to do. It may be a prohibition, but, and this is a big but, this is the but with the capital B. You put it in a 24 font. This is a big but. That, yesh avon gadol yoter mizeh. There's a bigger avera than telling secrets. You know what that is? Mishemonea atzmo milegalot ozen chaviro b'makom sheyesh tzorech la'atzil ashuk miyad oshko. You know that a person's about to be, excuse my language, screwed. It could be money, he's being overcharged, and it could be far worse. And you just keep your mouth shut. You don't get involved. That is a bigger avera, says the Pitchei Tshuva, than telling a secret. Mipnei shechoshesh li'isur lashon hara. That's being what we call in halachic language a chasid shoteh, a stupid chassid. Kigon, haroeh misha orev lechaviro lehogo ba'arma. You literally see that a person is taking out a knife and very quietly about to stab a fellow Jew or a fellow human being. You can't tell secrets, you just stand there. So, going to the contemporary case, I don't know all the details of these two officers and what they're charged with and what information they had, but it seemed from what the Prime Minister of Israel said that this information was vital to him in order to take the right decision. He was missing information because people in the chain of command were keeping secrets from him. And it seems to be an open and shut case from this Rambam and this Pitchei Tshuva that if we're talking about the public health, the public welfare of the Jewish people, then you have to tell secrets. It's not allowed. It's an obligation to tell secrets. And he goes on to say this is true with regard to inyanei mamon, in money, v'chen b'inyanei shiduchin, maybe in the most sensitive issue, shiduchim. We all know, person goes out with a girl, you know they're going out, you know something about the girl that nobody knows. It's your obligation to tell the boy so he makes an informed decision. If not, it could be what's called a mekach ta'ut. It could be a total false acquisition between them, and it can lead to terrible things. And just like you have a mitzvah of hashavat aveda to return a lost wallet, you have a mitzvah of hashavat nafsho. So let's see a few cases, instead of just leaving this theoretical, where this came to fore. So we mentioned the contemporary case of the information that was leaked to the Bild newspaper and, of course, to the Prime Minister. Let's take matchmaking. The Tzitz Eliezer. The Tzitz Eliezer died in the 21st century, Rav Eliezer Waldenberg. He's a Yerushalmi Gadol b'Yisrael. He was the posek of Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, where many of us, I'm sure, either visited or were actually, unfortunately, patients. I was in the emergency room there a few weeks ago, just for a few hours. It helped, but we've all been there. And we all know that Shaarei Tzedek is a very unique hospital. It's a hospital that works al pi halacha in every which way. My eldest son was born there. I was there for Shabbos, and I saw all the tricks of the trade. It still amazes me. The posek of that hospital until he died was the Tzitz Eliezer. I believe today the posek of Shaarei Tzedek is Rav Osher Weiss Shlita. So The Tzitz Eliezer writes a fascinating story. It includes, and really excuse me for being graphic, but it's what he writes. Bachura shelo nimtza etzla lo nartik velo rechem. There's a woman that's going out with a girl. Everything's working out. And he knows, the doctor, that she does not have a normative body. From our perspective, she cannot conceive and have children. Now, she did some sort of plastic surgery, so it's not seen, it's not felt, but she cannot have children. Does the doctor have to tell the boy, listen, I know something about the girl you're going out with. It's privileged information, but you better know she cannot have children. She doesn't have a uterus. From our perspective, she had cancer, they had to take out the uterus. You don't have a uterus, you can't have children. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, open and shut case, Lida'ati, in my opinion, Mechuyav harofeh legalot habachur mimum habachura. He must tell the boy this information. Now you're all going to look at me and say, wait a minute. Doesn't the doctor take a certain oath? What's the oath called? I always say it wrong, so I'm going to try to say it right and correct me. You can unmute yourself for this. It's not the Hippocratic oath, correct? Hippocratic means you're a hypocrite. What's the proper word for the oath that the doctor takes that doesn't divulge information of his patients to anyone? Anyone?
It's the Hippocratic oath, not the hypocritic, the Hippocratic.
Hippocratic, thank you, Dov. Hippocratic oath. So, the Tzitz Eliezer doesn't brush this off. He thinks the oath is an oath, you know? It may be in modern Hebrew or in English, but an oath is an oath. So what is he supposed to do? Bekesher l'shvuat harufim, and so diyut refuit. You know, a doctor has to keep all the information that he knows private. So what do you do about that? He says, in my opinion, this overrides that. But if you want to be a smart person, this is what you should do. You should call in the girl, and you should tell the girl, I know that you cannot conceive. And I think it would be a good idea for you to tell your husband-to-be the information. It may not bother him. You can adopt. But you have to tell him so he knows what he's getting into. And if she refuses, then says the Tzitz Eliezer, maybe you should get a beis din together so you can get out of the oath that you took as a doctor. So yes, secrets are important. In general, we don't divulge secrets, but if it's going to save lives, even to the extent of a potion for your eyes, you have to tell people. And in this case, this poor boy thinks he's going into a marriage that's going to have kids without knowing that it's impossible. Second example, Rav Ovadia Yosef. I don't think I have to introduce Rav Ovadia to this crowd. He died in 2014. His influence is still strong to this very day, and not just through the Shas party, which, I'll be honest, I don't hold from. I think that his halachic writings are as relevant today as they were when he died. We can't go to first base, in my opinion, without looking at the Rav Ovadia Yosef on the one hand and Rav Moshe Feinstein on the other. Two different schools of thought, but their influence continues to this day. In any case, Rav Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, died in 2014, was asked the following question, a little less dramatic than the Tzitz Eliezer. So this is not the posik of Shari Tzedek Hospital. Rav Ovadia lived at the end of his life in Har Nof, on the same street that we used to live on, Rehov HaKablan. And he's asked the following question, maybe on Rehov HaKablan. Hamishtadel lahasig rishayon nihiga. You want to get a license. V'hu chole b'machala smuya she'ina mitgalet al yedei bdikat rofeh regila. Before you get a license, it's normal procedure to go through a physical exam. And this is not something that will come up on the physical exam. Let's say from our perspective, this is, of course, a psychological sickness of some sort. So a regular doctor will check your heart, will check your lungs, will check your ears. He won't come up with it. Ask someone to Rav Ovadia, Ha'im mutar lerofa ha'ishi, his personal doctor that knows this, or lemishi yodea bebirura machalato, be it the psychologist, lahodia al kach lemisrad harishui, to tell the DMV, to tell the Misrad Rishui that gives out licenses, hey, this guy is a potential, because if he gets a license, it's a very high probability that he will cause te'unot va'asanot b'nihigato. He will cause accidents in his driving. Answers Rav Ovadia lohodia miyad. Don't wait right now, this evening. They don't pick up 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You pick up the phone, you tell the DMV everything you know, because he is putting other drivers in danger because of his condition. I mean, just guessing. If the person thinks he's a little schizophrenic, that everyone's trying to kill him, and he's on the road, he can kill people. And then he quotes a former chief rabbi. Rav Ovadia Yosef was the Sephardic chief rabbi from 1972 through 1983, if I'm not mistaken, and he was not happy to end his tenure in 1983. Before him, the Ashkenazic chief, with him was Rav Goren, and that's a relationship for, let's just say, a whole lecture in and of itself. I'll just tell you the joke that's associated with their relationship. They were both opinionated people, great Gdolim. It wasn't a shidduch in heaven. In any case, Rav Goren was once giving a shir. He said he was giving a good shir, and he said, my shir's so good, it should be a sefer in Tanakh. They said, but Rebbe, there's only 24 books in Tanakh. Which book should we get rid of? And without batting an eyelash, he said, get rid of Ovadia. Well, to make a long story short, they didn't exactly get along. Now, before Rav Goren, there was a chief rabbi named Rav Unterman. Rav Unterman, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, he quotes him from a book called Torah ve'Hamidina, that brought in the name of a responsim called Netivot Shmuel, the following, Ro'eh Cheshbon b'Sachar. If you are a Ro'eh Cheshbon, an accountant, and you see that someone is crooked with money, and he is faking tax receipts and other such things, and after warning him, he still does it. He still does it. He's a pathological liar, and he just fakes things out in money issues. Rashai, lemutar, lero'eh cheshbon, lefarsemo, ulevaisho barabim. So Rav Unterman paskin that even in money issues, it's just money. If indeed someone is crooked and he's faking people out and hurting people financially, from our perspective, think of Madoff, it's a mitzvah to make sure to make it public. And the same is true with another chief rabbi, this time of Yerushalayim, Rav Nisim Karelitz, who was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim in the latter 20th century. Mi shigilalo et asod, or et ha'ezek hagadol sheyachol liyot im lo yisaper, vadai de'en isur lesaper et asod. If you know a secret, and there's going to be great damage if that secret doesn't get out, you must tell the secret. This is true with regard to shidduchim, he says. And this is true even with regard to accepting people to an institution. Right now, people are trying to get into mechinot, to Hesda yeshivas, to high schools. If you know privileged information, and this privileged information has the ability of hurting other students, then you must tell the school so they know what they're getting into. So as we could see, there may be a prohibition of telling secrets. It may come out from the famous lemor or lo telech rachil be'amecha. But the exception to the rule is clear. And that is, if not telling the secret will cause damage. And in my opinion, based on what I read on the news, and I don't know all the information, so obviously I'm not paskening, but based on what I read, the Prime Minister of Israel was not given all the information about the hostages that was leaked to the Bild newspaper, which means that he could not make an informed decision. And when you talk about hostage deals, we're talking about lives, not just freeing hostages. For every hostage we got back, we obviously gave up terrorists. So this is real pikuach nefesh. And indeed, if these two officers felt that this information is not getting to the prime minister and it could cause damage, it seems halachically they were on firm ground. It doesn't mean they don't have to pay the price. Sometimes there's laws in a state, and for doing the right thing, you have to pay the price. When I was a kid in my teen years, it was the Oslo agreements to the second power, 1993, 94, 95, 96. And there was a lot of talk about refusing orders. But as we said, if we become soldiers at 18 and we're going to refuse orders because we believe it's going to cause damage to the Jewish people, we are willing to go to jail for it. That's the law of the country. You refuse orders, you go to jail. So you do the right thing, but you have to be willing to pay the price. And ultimately, I'd like to end with one little tiny source from Masechet Sanhedrin. Amar lehem Reish Lakish, said Reish Lakish, Halev yodea im la'akel ve'im la'akal kelot. Your heart knows if what you're doing is for the good or to just ruin. In other words, when you tell a secret, maybe prohibited, maybe not, if you're 100% authentically convinced that telling that secret is actually going to do good for the Jewish people and for the world, then you should tell the secret. But if you're just doing it for akal kelot, I don't even think I have to translate the word. It sounds better in Hebrew. I wrote deceit, but it basically means you're doing it to become famous, or you're doing it because you enjoy it. They once asked Rav Soloveitchik, define what Lashon Hara is. You know, the Chafetz Chaim wrote books this big. We need a brisker definition. What's Lashon Hara? What's slander? He said Lashon Hara is anything you enjoy telling over. Namely, if you're just doing it because you enjoy it, you're doing it because, hey, I know it, so I'm going to become famous, then obviously it's prohibited or at least a bad idea. But if you're doing it for the right reasons, as allegedly these two officers did, then it's actually obligatory because you could save lives. If it's true in money and it's true in shidduchim, then for sure it's true when it comes to war and the hostage deals. And I'd like to end with two stories about my father and secrets. One story goes like this. In one of the places he worked, there was a feud between two people above him. And one of them wanted to get him on his side. So he called him into his office and said, Tzvi, as was his name in Israel, Ata iti or ata negdi? Are you with me or are you against me? And if you're with me, I need the dirt on the other guy. My father was very smart. Somehow got out of that conversation. I don't know how. Walked into the other person who was his immediate boss and said, I need a week's vacation. You'll thank me for it. He said, what is this all about? What do you mean you need a week's vacation? I need a week's vacation. I'll take a sick leave for a week. Believe me, you'll thank me one day. And the boss had enough faith in him that he said, fine. And he didn't tell any secrets, not about this guy, not about that guy. Didn't ruin it for anyone, but took himself out of it. Because he knew the minute he opens his mouth, he's taking sides, it's going to cause damage, and not always damage that saves lives. It's damage for the sake of damage. If two people are at each other's throats, you know that a lot of slander comes out of it. Story number one. Story number two is much nicer. And this had to do with me. We davened in the Young Israel of Woodmere before we made Aliyah. In the first year that we davened there for Rosh Hashanah, my father bought a seat for my mother and for him, as he did all these years. But lo and behold, I was already in third grade. And by third grade, with that Rabbi Monk that I mentioned, not only did I know how to read Hebrew, but I actually knew how to daven already. So Comes the first day Rosh Hashanah, and I'm sitting next to my father in shul. Happens to be an empty seat, because it was a small minyan of 4 minyanim in the same shul. It was a big shul, and this was a small minyan within those 3 minyanim. I think Leah Bernstein is on this call. She remembers it. Her husband, Zichrono Livracha, also davened there. And I sat next to him the entire davening for the first day of Rosh Hashanah and for the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Now, no one was sitting there. On the big poster outside where everyone sits on Rosh Hashanah, there was no one scheduled to sit there, not for Rosh Hashanah and not for Yom Kippur. And my father could have kept it a secret, quote unquote, that I am sitting in shul for nothing, because no one's sitting there anyway. It's a clear case of ze neheneh v'ze lo chaser. I'm benefiting from being in shul, and I'm not taking away anyone's seat, because the seat is empty. My father refused to hear of it. Tzom Gedalia calls up the shul office, says, I need another seat for Yom Kippur. For who? For my son. It's a secret, but he knows how to daven now. He's sitting in shul. It's not right that he should sit in shul and not pay for a seat. Put another seat on my bill. And that was a secret that I call leto'elet. Namely, shuls make money out of selling seats for Rosh Hashanah. That's part of their revenue, part of their income. Now, if I didn't sit in the seat, if I went out to play, fine. That was the case until 2nd grade. But now I'm in 3rd grade. And from that day on, we had 2 seats in that little minyan until we made Aliyah. So that was a secret, leto'elet, and a very big to'elet. Because once I knew you're paying for a seat, then I can promise you that I sat in that seat. And I did daven. And whoever remembers my father knows that he was a master storyteller. He could relive a story from 40 years ago as if it happened yesterday. I can tell you that he never went ahead and publicly told secrets about people when he told these stories. He could say a person, he could say, I won't say his name, but he was very, very careful not to tell secrets and privileged information he knew, even though he was a talkative person that liked to share stories. When you spoke to him, he could tell you a story for 20 minutes flat and still not divulge things that he shouldn't have. I believe that that balance is hard. It's not easy. They say the Chafetz Chaim, who wrote all those books on Lashon Hara, was a very talkative person because he wanted to control the conversation so that there wouldn't be Lashon Hara. The challenge is not to be a quiet person who says, I don't talk because, I'm scared of Lashon Hara. And I don't say anything on Shabbos because of idle talk on Shabbos. The contrary. We should learn how to speak, keep secrets when we need to, and divulge information when it's obligatory. And that's the way a healthy relationship between people should be. And that, in my opinion, is part of the legacy of my father. To be talkative and yet not to divulge secrets. And I believe that many people on this Zoom that knew him remembers those stories, remembers hearing them in detail, and yet if you relive them in your mind, you will remember that he never told secrets about people publicly that he thought would hurt them. So, Be'ezrat Hashem, I hope that the Jewish people will get out of this war sooner than later. We're not out of the woods yet, unfortunately, and we're far from it, in my opinion. There's a lot of challenges that we still have, and part of the challenges is going to be this, keeping secrets from people that have to take very cardinal decisions. And in my opinion, the secret is not going to be to keep quiet, to say nothing, but actually the opposite, to do everything possible to be talkative, to help, and yet to keep that balance between, on the one hand, not divulging what you're not supposed to, and on the other hand, divulging when it's obligatory. I thank you all for listening, and I thank you all for coming together, especially this evening, in honor of the yahrzeit of my father. I just would like to end with a tefillah that you usually say at the end of a learning for a yortzeit. As I said, my father's yortzeit is Shabbos, not tonight. And the reason that obviously we can't do a Zoom on Shabbos is because we haven't yet found the technology. So therefore we did it this evening, and I didn't want to impinge upon your Shabbos preparations tomorrow night, because this Shabbos we're not taking out one, not two, but we're taking out 3 Sifrei Torah. And Minhag Yisrael is that if you take out 3 Sifrei Torah, yes, Heshi, 1 for Parsha Truma, 1 for Parsha Rosh Chodesh, and 1 for Parshat Shkalim, then the minhag is you have to make 3 kugels, 3 different kugels. So people are going to be very busy tomorrow night making kugels. So therefore, you're pointing to her, to Sue, and Sue's pointing to you. No problem. You'll fight it out. But I didn't want to do it Thursday night because too many kugels to make. So with your permission, I'll just end with a tefillah that all the learning that we did should be Le'ilui Nishmat Avi Mori Tzvi Meir ben Moshe Yonatan. Ana Adonai Malei Rachamim Asher B'yadcha Nefesh Kol Chai V'Ruach Kol Besar Ish Yiyena Leratzon Lefanecha Toratenu Ba'avur Nishmat Avi Mori Tzvi Meir ben Moshe Yonatan Ugmolna Imo B'chazdecha Agadol לפתוח לו שערי רחמים וחסד ושערי גן עדן ותקבל אותו באהבה ובחיבה. אצל הנשמות של הצדיקים והצדקניות, החסידים והחסידות, ליהנות מזיו שכינתך, להשביע מטובך הצפון לצדיקים. והגוף ינוח בקבר במנוחה נכונה בחדווה ובשמחה ובשלום, כי דכתיב יבוא שלום, ינוחו על משכבותם, הולך נכחו. וכתיב ילזו חסידים בכבוד ירננו על משכבותם, וכתיב אם תשכב ולא תפחד, ושכבת וערבה שנתך. ותשמור אותו מחיבוט הקבר, מרימה ומתוליה, ותסלח ותמחול לו על כל פשעיו, כי אין צדיק בארץ, אשר יעשה טוב ולא יחטא. וזכור לו זכויותיו וצדקותיו אשר עשה, ותשפיע לו בנשמתו בקבר מרוב טוב הצפון לצדיקים. ותשכון פתח בדד ושאנן מפחד רעה, ואל ירא פני גיהנום ונשמתו תהיה צרורה בצרור החיים, להחייתו בתחיית המתים. עם כל מתי עמך ישראל ברחמים. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all very, very much.
Amen.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So I just
Ah, thank
to
you.
add one thing. Oh,
Yes, Leah, please.
so Kala Kavod, that's such a beautiful memory that you have of your father paying for your seat. And I have beautiful memories of watching you as a very young child walk to young Israel of Woodmere. And your father, Lava Shalom, your parents got such good value for them wanting to pay for that seat that you remember it all those years ago. And it was just such a beautiful synopsis of who your father, Lava Shalom, was. And it's just beautiful. So Kala Kavod, may you and your family have wonderful memories, and may your father's neshama have an aliyah, because there's a chutz of knowing him and all of you for so many years, and it was really a privilege. It's a privilege. I'm glad I could participate. Kala kavod to you.
Thank you very, very much, Leah. And indeed, your husband, Harold, Zichron Levracha, was right there with us in all the
Yes.
minyanim that we were in. So you definitely remember it probably far better than me. For those that don't know, I used to have hair over here. You can picture it. That's the time that Leah's talking about.
שוע יישר כוח גדול.
תודה רבה, אלי, ותודה שהצטרפת.
כוח. לילה טוב. Thank you. לעילוי נשמה.
Thank you all for joining. Bezrat Hashem, we should come together for many smachot as we get into the Chodesh of Adar. And we should be zochesh HaChodesh asher ne'epach lahem miyagon lesimcha u'me'ever liyom tov should happen this year speedily.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi.
Amen.